In a world where your robot can cook you a better meal than Thomas Keller differential laundry, you will pay more money than ever to eat a differential laundry.
Outcomes, look at that. Overcooked on the bottom.
Not because it's actually better food,
And it looks like Gandhi's flip-flop.
but because it was cooked by Thomas Keller. And so what doesn't change is biology, and biologically we are like status-seeking beings, and that's related to other humans. So we are going to care about Mr. Beast, we're going to care about Blackpink. Like, yes, you can like create a billion Blackpinks who are like Blackpink, who can make good songs, but there is only one Blackpink. There's only one Mr. Beast.
AutoSkills helps teams go from AI curious to AI ready. We run tailored workshops to uncover where AI has the biggest impact in your business, whether that's automating repetitive tasks, cutting hours out of your daily workflows, or choosing the right mix of tools and custom solutions. It's practical, hands-on, and built to get your team using AI for work that matters. Book your free 30-minute AI readiness audit at autoskills.ai. When COVID erased revenue overnight, Siqi Chen realized something every founder eventually runs into. The way most teams make decisions is broken. Endless spreadsheets, constant scenario planning, and debates over assumptions weren't helping leaders act with confidence. That moment forced him to ask a bigger question. What would it take to give every operator the kind of decision support that feels less like Excel and more like an Iron Man suit? Siqi is a founder and CEO of Runway, the FP&A platform that doubled revenue over the past year, based on rethinking how companies understand and act on their numbers. In this conversation, he shares the strategies behind making AI a real decision-making partner instead of a flashy add-on. You'll hear how he thinks about design choices that make AI feel native, the culture and hiring moves that spread AI judgment across the team, and the practical ROI tactics that turn prototypes into habits people actually use. Listen to the full episode for playbooks you can take straight back to your org. How to sharpen recurring decisions, introduce AI in a way people trust, and get your team AI ready faster than you think. If you enjoy the conversation, subscribe or follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes with leaders building on the front lines of AI adoption. Now, enjoy the show. All right, Siqi, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Well, I always like to start with a bit of a story, right? And so I would like for you to maybe describe the story of the ChatGPT moment, as a lot of people call it. November 2023, ChatGPT comes out. You may have been testing GPT-3 already in the playground, but this is the moment when it became really popularized. Everyone started to realize how powerful this technology actually was. Can you describe around that time frame what implications it had on the business you were running and just any changes or any interesting initiatives that you had taken on around that time?
I don't know that that particular moment changed a whole lot, because we're actually like fairly early in terms of accessing the GPT-3 API. We had access back in May of 2020. Like, we're one of the first companies to have access to it. I emailed GDB about like, hey, we want to try it out for finance use cases. So one of the first features that we built, and this is back in 2020, is we would integrate with your QuickBooks, and it's the dumbest use for an LLM, but based on sort of the account name, we wanted to find automatically the best emoji to pair it with. So yeah, we've been experimenting for quite a while, and when I saw ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, that's fun. Like, I think Sam didn't think it would be as like huge as it was, and nobody did. I was like, well, this makes sense. Like, this is a better playground. It seems like a public playground. But the two things that I did remember from that is, one, noticing this one feature that I thought was just so small, that very few people talked about, but I really felt like, oh, this is like a different type of product. And that feature was the sidebar and a list of chats. And the thing that really blew my mind was the chats named themselves. Like, that's never was possible ever before, right? They name themselves automatically based on a context. Like, any normal interface, you're like, start a chat, give the chat a name, right? So I thought, man, that is like just such a deep embedding of AI. It's like AI native design, and there's very few examples of that early. So I was struck by that. But other than that, no, we've been building with it. Both internal tools and external tools for quite a bit. So it wasn't as much of a shock.
Fast forward to today, you share this idea of ambient AI, how you're integrating AI into various parts of your product. You're not necessarily adding AI as an add-on, as a separate feature, but ingraining into all the different parts of the product where you can maybe reduce friction or make the user experience more pleasant. And I'm curious, was that sort of a gradual progression, or was it more like a step function movement towards that process since the first time you got your hands on the GPT-3 API?
It is inspired by a couple of things. So there's this guy, Joel Spolsky, Joel on Software, Fog Creek Software, big software blogger back in, the early 2000s or so. I started Stack Overflow, right, on Trello. And he wrote this blog post, I think maybe 20 years ago, where he described the difference between Google engineers and Microsoft engineers. And one of the quotes was, Google uses the Bayesian filter the way the Microsoft engineer uses an if statement. And it's just like a different level of abstraction of engineering. And that really stuck with me. And when I thought about GPT and what it can do, I thought a really deep natively AI product should use an LM the way we currently use those statements. And so when I saw that mini bar, it sort of like connected the dots a little bit. So that was like one train of thought. The other train of thought is really around what Runway is as a product and our positioning. So we are a tool for thinking, not a workflow tool. And what that means is like the value that Runway gives people is not just giving you the answer, because the users of our product are people who run companies, CFOs. And the value that you get from Runway is about making better decisions, developing better intuition. And we have tools for thinking like spreadsheets, like a whiteboard even, to help us with that. And so when the primary interface is this agent, or you're just asking a question, give the answer, it doesn't serve that purpose. But when you think about different expressions of AI, like a cursor, right? Like it's not just a chat, it's auto-completing as you're doing the work. And so I thought like this idea of using AI very natively and helping you to accelerate the work that you're doing, making things more clear as you're working, is a really good use of AI for if you're building into overthinking. And actually, completely independently, 2 months ago, Andre Comparthy did a talk, and he talked about agentic is like kind of like the hype, but right now you should have a lot of human in the loop. And the opportunity is actually not to build like sort of a Terminator like robot, but to build an Iron Man suit. And like the Iron Man suit analogy is like exactly what I think about in terms of the ambient intelligence strategy that we're pursuing.
It's amazing. Actually, we're in the middle of finalizing our logo for AI Ready, and the Iron Man suit is the exact inspiration that we were taking when building that graphic. So that's great validation, if anything. So what I think of when you describe that is the importance of having taste, right? I think what most leaders do when they think about AI and understand that it's something that they need to think about and find ways to integrate not only in their products, but also for their team to adopt to improve operating leverage, they're not necessarily thinking about it as critically in terms of where exactly it should be applied and the form factor in which it should be presented. And so what you end up with is a lot of just one-off POCs where you have a couple of engineers, maybe a product person, go off and experiment with an AI feature. And most of the time that ends up not working out too well. And then they just dismiss the notion of AI as transformative and just decide that we're in the middle of a hype cycle, which maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but that's kind of the conclusion a lot of folks come to. But the folks that I've chatted with who have successfully adopted AI and seen substantial improvements in their user experience and other business outcomes are the ones who have this idea of taste, who understand the limitations, the value propositions of the technology, and who can think from first principles as to where and how to apply it. Now, clearly, the way that you're describing it represents, or at least it showcases underlying taste. How do you spread that across your entire organization? Is this something that you maybe filter for during the hiring process? Is it something that you have encouraged employees to improve over time? I'm curious, like, what does that process look like for taking this thinking and then spreading it across your entire organization?
Yeah, I think three things. One is the way we started in the very, very early days is just leading by example because we're small. So I didn't ship that many PRs for Runway, but like one of the PRs, the first PR is like an AI feature. It automatically like wrap emojis. Like this is like 5 years ago now. When our website blew up and we were getting, more leads than we handle, and this is like 2, 3 years ago before we have amazing AI lead qualification tools, like I built that tool myself. We have a bot internally called Jam Session in Notion that I also built myself. And you just summon Jam Sessions user, you can say Jam Session with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk will come in as Jam Session and leave comments as if they were Elon Musk and critique whatever thing that you're working on. So we have AI hackathons. I build these tools myself. So that's one, leading from the front. And it's really fun to do, right? In the ChatGPT store, Universal Primer is like the number one GPT that is under education thing. And I made that in an afternoon. And so when people look at the CEO spending time doing this, they understand what makes me happy. And so that's generally helpful. The second thing is you celebrate the wins, right? So when this is a recent thing, this is not something we built ourselves, but like the minute Cursor Agent came out and had a Slack integration, our CX people started just summoning Cursor and say, hey, Cursor, can you go fix this like pixel thing and this copy? And just went and submitted a pull request. And I just celebrated the crap out of that. I'm like, this is exactly what I want. Like the more non-technical people who are closing the gap between product feedback and shipping, the better. That's amazing. And so I encourage the engineering team explicitly spend time on this, reviewing these PRs, and also like empowering Cursor so that we have like better context, so that the agents can form better and do more useful work. Is responding to product feedback and enabling more non-technical people to improve products. That's the second one. And the third one is over time, and this is more of a gradual process, it's definitely affected how we hire. So now a part of my interview battery is like, how do you use AI? Like, tell me the coolest thing you built with AI. We've always hired for higher agency, and that's like more important than ever, obviously, in this regime. But another thing that oddly enough is we've seen is that at least for engineers, we're just hiring kind of only senior people now. Because like if it can be vibe coded by someone who's not even an engineer at all, right? So then the useful engineering work is really like the engineering work that Cursor or Cloud isn't today productively capable of. So those are the three big things that I've seen work.
There's a few things I want to double click into there. And by the way, did you share a tweet about that Cursor experience? I'm pretty sure I shared something with our team in Slack.
I think I did that yesterday. Like it's just such a, we live in a future moment, right? It's like we're just, a customer support person was like, let's summon a robot engineer, and the robot engineer within like 2 minutes submitted a pull request and then pushes. That's just wild. In Slack.
It is crazy. It is definitely crazy. So a couple things I want to dig into there. You mentioned hackathons. Actually, that's been something that's come up in every single conversation I've had on the show so far. Every single team that has leaned into AI, I would say every team that I've chatted with so far is in the top percentile, at least in terms of AI transformation and AI ROI. Hackathons seem to be a key ingredient of this transformation process, at least at the very beginning. What do those hackathons look like? Did you keep them bounded in any way, or were they kind of just free for all? Everyone just experiment with different AI tools and build workflows that you find interesting. I'm curious how you had designed those.
Our first real AI hackathon was, I want to say like 2 years ago. It was like late 2023. Yeah, late 2023 is our first one. And that is, right around the time ChatGPT came out. And the direction was, if you're non-technical, like try to build something, build a GPT, build a GPT, do some context prompt engineering, and see if you can make your work better. Direction to engineers is build a feature, and you just have to call it LM at some point. That was it. And we gave it like 3 days. Everyone demoed at the end. We have a different hackathon process now, which I'll tell you. And just the thing that was really mind-blowing, but also maybe a cautionary tale, was that this is like, I think pre-GPT-4, if I remember correctly. And first of all, the amount of magic, like the impressiveness of demos you can create in such a short amount of time is incredible. Like, wow, like we can build all of this in 3 days. And then like actually getting to work in production with real customers is a whole nother story, right? It was impressive. It was a good Kickstarter, but also like gave everyone a better idea of like what models today are capable or not capable of, or at least at that time. And so now our hackathons are actually like, they used to be 48 hours. Now our hackathons, we have hack sprints now, and they're 2 weeks. And the rule is that we do demo after the first week, and you're supposed to get your work done. And when we say the next week for shipping all of the things that you actually built. So like we want things to be shipped is the only rule change that we have now.
What is the process of getting it from 80 to 100%, if you will, look like? And how does that differ from the process of getting something from 0 to 80%?
So there's basically two components, right? One is scaffolding, evals, and that's just a combination of infrastructure work and iteration, right, from customer data. That's one. And the other you don't have a whole lot of control with, which is just model capabilities. And we kind of learned, because we're so early at this, we kind of like experienced the Reuters phenomenon, right? So Reuters famously, they spent a couple $1 million fine-tuning GPT-3, and then GPT-4 came out and then it just blew their fine-tuned thing out of the water. That's kind of what we experienced. We first like demoed our sort of scenario planning thing. It was like 3 years ago or something. And let me tell you, getting to that to actually work in a robust way was damn near impossible. It was only until like really when '01, when the reasoning models came out, or like, oh, and mostly actually it was early this year when '03 came out. We looked at that and we tried that and we said, wow, it can one shot a model from like a screenshot now. We can just give it our grammar, which is never seen before, and actually like completely replicate most of the model out of the box immediately. That is game changing, and that's just blew out anything that we built in house in terms of scaffolding.
Fascinating. And one of the things that I've heard a lot from leaders is this idea of AI sprawl, right? When they're going through this transformation process, there are so many different tools that they have to choose from. And oftentimes what they end up doing is just letting folks make their own decisions on the tools that they want to adopt, or maybe they are a bit more restrictive about it. And usually what they end up with is one, well, they have maybe some analysis paralysis during the decision stage. But the other issue is if they keep it too open-ended, they end up with a bunch of different licenses that they're paying for, and they don't necessarily know which ones they want to stick with, right? They don't want to have maybe 5 different tools for the same use case, like content generation. Is that an issue that you've faced at all? And I'm curious, if it is, then what are some of the ways that you've mitigated that, or maybe gotten folks to consolidate the types of tools that they're using for these AI workflows?
I would say that is probably what is happening internally at Runway now. And that is not an optimization that I think is worth optimizing over because of the opportunity cost of it. Because right now in the marketplace, as we've seen 2 years ago, there weren't all of these like sort of top of funnel tools available. We built our own. Now there's more of them, and the number of tools available are accelerating. And new opportunities for new businesses and products come out all the time as the models improve. And so do you want to optimize for like everyone to be using the same tool that's consistent, or do you want to optimize for giving people the freedom to explore the rapid, it's evolving faster than ever from products to model capabilities? And I think the alpha is in allowing for the freedom of exploration, at least today. So I would rather focus the culture on encouraging experimentation and trying these things, and you might discover a really great new model and a great tool for this use case. And that is like far more valuable than consolidating like a few $100 on some SaaS tool that maybe people forgot to use.
It's a very practical take. And aside from the cursor mind-blowing moment, I'm curious what other workflows come to mind, or whether their applications or builds come to mind when you're thinking about the most transformative or impactful things that you've adopted that are enabled as a result of AI.
Yeah. So I talk about the lead generation one. So that one is pretty impactful. Like we don't do manual qualification, and we haven't done it for like 3 years, right? That was pretty magical. Just be able to like describe in vague terms, like uh, without hard and fast rules, what defines a qualified customer and having it just be right. Even with 3.5, did a pretty good job. So that was like the first real like, oh, this saved us like headcount, right? 3 years ago. That was like really interesting. One of the things I built myself is there's a million tools out there, but I actually haven't seen one that does the thing I want, which is I have a GPT that actually reads all my emails and puts the right labels in it and learns from it. So that one's pretty fun. For speed learning, this is externally, I use that all the time, Universal Primer. And then internally, there's a bunch of tools. So I actually so I just want to caveat, this is like a little bit spicy. I don't make hiring decisions off of this, but I have a standard interview with a standard set of questions, with a standard rubric of like what makes a good answer, what I'm a lot looking for. And after every interview, my GPT will just go and parse it and like analyze it and give me like what it thinks the scores are. And I do look at it. It's like, and 9 out of 10 times is exactly what I would have said. So I don't have to write interview feedback. That's pretty helpful as well. And then for our customer success team, we have solutions architects traditionally because people have pretty complicated data integration. And now we can just one shot it. You can just like literally describe what it is, and actually not even describe what it is. It's even better. So you meet with a customer and we have a meeting transcript. We throw the meeting transcript into this thing and it'll output the SQL, and we just paste it in and it'll just like one shot it. It's like, it's pretty wild. So those are some of the practical examples of some of the team tools that we built.
And any tools you'd recommend? ChatGPT seems to be the workhorse here. And I'm assuming for the lead qualification, is it default that you're using?
So we are on use of default now, but for the first 2 years or so, it was on a custom built stack, and it was Zapier, Clearbit, and yeah, obviously OpenAI. And I think that's it.
I see. And for stitching together some of these workflows today, is there any tool in particular that has stood out to you?
I still like Zapier. I don't love their interface, sorry, Wade, but like I do. I mean, is what they have going for us is like the sheer robustness and comprehensiveness of the integrations. And yeah, it does the job.
There's so many different tools available, all the way from the developer-oriented tools. You have the LangChains, and you have plenty of no-code tools nowadays. You have, as you mentioned, Zapier. There's Lindy. So Lindy 2.0 or 3.0 just came out, and that has some cool new features for multi-agent workflows and enabling those. But there's definitely no shortage of tools available for stitching together different things.
Yeah, I think what Flow has done with Lindy is awesome. I will say I haven't used this as much personally, and we're just starting to get going on this with our GTM team, but the number of times I've heard N8N mentioned is like really interesting. It's like almost every time when someone asks like a question related, like what no code tool, NAN. And it's like kind of interesting. It's like Zapier, but you can fall down to like source code. So that's something I would be exploring too, and maybe porting some things over.
Yeah, plus one, I hear N8N all the time as well. It's definitely leaned into the agent stuff really heavily. I remember using it before ChatGPT.
I didn't realize it'd been around for that long. Yeah, it takes time to get good software. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I want to go back to the hiring point. So you mentioned you look for some level of experience for a few reasons, but mainly because more experienced engineers are going to be able to get more out of AI tools. Do you agree with this idea that AI is a multiplier? The 10x engineer can become a 100x engineer, and the 0.5x engineer becomes a 0.25x engineer. Is that a notion that resonates with you?
Not really. I know there's like some, questionable academic paper around like if you're an okay engineer, whatever slows you down. I think if you're actually a 0.5 engineer, I think it probably makes you a 1x engineer is my guess. Like, because the average 0.5 engineer they're very bad. like the average like person is not that knowledgeable or smart, and ChatGPT almost certainly is more reasonable and knows more than an average person. So it's hard to imagine that's not true for the 0.5x engineer. For the 10x engineer, I think it's more subtle than that. I actually don't know that it makes them 100x more productive. The thing about a 10x 100x engineer like I think Paul Graham actually wrote about this in some essay, and his observation is that it's not people question the existence of a 10x 100x engineer, but like people actually know what they're talking about. Is like that, of course they exist. Like I've seen them, but he would go further and say it's not a 10x or 100x engineer that exists. It's an infinite x engineer, in that like there are engineers who literally if other people, it's you can give them a million years, they just can't do it, right? And so I think that's a real value of a 10x or 100x engineer. And I think right now there are still things that a 10 100x engineer can do that's an LM can't. But the amount of like sort of like boring scaffolding work that we spend time on, they spend less time on. So I'm not sure that the leverage is actually 10 or 100x. And also depends on your domain, right? If you're like working on like a relatively simple brand new product, you're going to get a lot more leverage out of it than something more complex.
Yeah, that's fair. And I want to talk a bit about ROI. Last year, you saw 4x revenue growth, and you maintained your headcount for the most part, as far as I understand. What role did AI play in this? And more specifically, do you think that the same growth would have been possible without AI, and it was more a way of just keeping your headcount the same? Or do you think that maybe enabled more top line growth while also helping you maintain your employees? I'm curious, like what ROI, how you see the ROI of AI over the past year and the impressive revenue growth that you've seen.
I see it's a force multiplier. And so there's two components. This one is like, even back in 2020, and this was almost certainly too early. When we founded Runway and GPT-3 first came out, I thought this is a really interesting time to be founding a company, because I can see how a company could scale instead of headcount. So I made an internal goal to make it possible for us to never be over 100 people. And over the past year or so, certainly like we've seen leverage from both engineering and marketing, and we're about 50 people today. And I think the choice to stay small is more of a cultural choice, because smaller teams are just more fun to work with. You get to do more. Everyone has more ownership and agency. But from a business outcomes perspective, I'm actually not as religious as I was like 5 years ago. I think part of it was like we were early in that thinking. It took a while for the models to really get to a capability where we can use it productively inside our product. So that's one point. And the other thing here is that the amount of like engineering leverage that we got, I mean, all that only really happened around the last year or so. And as you have more engineering leverage, it becomes rational to actually hire more engineers, not less. And so that becomes, I think, less of a sort of like, oh, we can save on headcount, and more of a cultural choice, I think, for us.
I'd love to dig into that some more. So that's maybe counterintuitive for a lot of folks. When the leverage that an engineer has increases, the case for hiring more engineers increases. I think a lot of people see it as the opposite. I'm curious if you can dig into why that's your philosophy.
So I think one of the frameworks I think about creating value is leverage, right? And so that's why software was interesting to me as a child, because if you are a person who dig holes and you get paid by an hour, you get paid while you're digging a hole, right? But software, when you build it, it's basically this machine that digs holes for you, and that's why you're gonna get paid more money for that. It's like making money while doing productive work while you're sleeping, and that's why software is valuable. And so when their ability to create these machines that generate value persistently increases, the cost goes down and leverage increases, it becomes rational because it's profitable to build software. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hiring engineers, and engineers wouldn't be getting paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so when that equation, like the reward increases, just purely rationally, it makes sense for you to hire more engineers, because it means you can create more value, assuming that you're a well-run company and all these different things. That's the simple math.
If you're looking at the different functions of your business, engineering, you mentioned last year especially, was a year that marked a huge increase in the amount of leverage that an engineer has. What functions are benefiting most from the new AI tools and technologies coming out, and which functions are benefiting the least?
The least. It's hard to imagine which ones are least. But, in terms of the economically productive use cases that I'm aware of, I think the most economically productive one is going to be customer support. That's just like directly useful, directly cost center. Like those are some of the fastest growing companies. And then starting to go up the stack in terms of like what are the types of work that's kind of rote communication work that requires minimal judgment. So ARAP is pretty hot. And that's just like sending reminder emails. It's sort of inbound GTM, outbounding SVRs, that kind of thing, where again, it's like mostly rote writing work. That's pretty impactful. And then there's engineering. And so all of that's been impactful. What has been least impactful? I was going to say product, but I don't think so. Like product, it's been really impactful to product too, because the speed at which you can like summarize and get insights from customer meetings and the speed at which you can prototype has meaningful change. It's really hard to identify an area where it hasn't been impactful.
How about design? That seems to come up every now and then.
You're right. That's the one. That
Yeah.
would be the one.
Do you think it's going to change over the next year?
It's hard to say. Yeah. So even for design, though, our designers write code prototypes, so it has been impactful. But you're right. By a strict ranking, that would probably be the least impactful one. I do not. It's hard to say. I don't know. Like I never want to be the one to say, yeah, that's not going to be a thing because this is the worst it's ever going to be, and it's only accelerating. I suspect that might be slower than others. I'm aware of a few companies that have been attacking it. Diagram, right, was acquired by Figma, or some other companies that are getting off the ground that are trying to sort of like democratize the notion of taste. I think it's doable. It's not clear what that product looks like today, but yeah, I think that's going to be one of the later ones.
I agree with you. And you mentioned taste there. I think when it comes to design, the entire job is about having good taste, isn't it? It's not just purely operational where, well, maybe for some companies it is, right? Churn out this type of content on this regular cadence and it doesn't need to be super creative. But for many businesses, the taste aspect is super important.
That's a really good observation. And I haven't spent a whole lot thinking about it, but now that I am thinking about it, I can hypothesize for why I think it is probably more difficult. Like my intuition says that it is. And I think as I decompose it, I think there are a few factors here. If I'm talking about product design in particular, in order to design a good product, it's not just reasoning, it's a lot of context, right? You need to have like product vision, competitive context, customer context, and getting all of that within context accessible by an agent is still like really difficult. There's actually not really good products off the shelf that's going to say, we're going to be in every meeting, every PRD, and we're going to do deep research on your company and your market and get really good context for your product itself. So that's one. And then the other thing is that product design is visual, particularly in a structured way, right? So it's not obviously not well suited for an LLM. It's not text, but also a diffusion model doesn't do that, right? Because like these are all buttons and structure and that kind of thing. And so I think there are sort of foundational model, I wouldn't say limitations, but drag and friction that makes it more difficult and probably a later thing and a much harder thing than the other things that we're doing.
That makes complete sense. Are you seeing any convergence across the EPD org, folks on the engineering, product, and design organizations, where maybe you see a bit more blending together of responsibilities, where maybe you have designers who are shipping code now, maybe you have product folks who are shipping code now, maybe you have engineers who are more involved in the development of PRDs and things of that sort? Is that something you're seeing?
Yeah. Today in Slack, one of our engineers for Stripe just send a message about like where the product should go, a product strategy memo. The thing I tweeted yesterday was a live screenshot from our Slack, and it was a customer support person shipping a PR via Cursor. We've had a sales guy ship dark mode, but this is last year. So I wouldn't say it's just EPD. It is across the company, the lines are blurring. Our head of sales just dumped 3,000 sales calls, right? And summarized them. And now we have at a glance battle cards, and that was done in about 10 minutes. So it is blurring the lines, and that's something that is a litmus test for me. That's something I want to actively encourage. I think I had this other tweet that was just a brain fart, but I really think one of the litmus tests or good metric for the AI nativeness of a company is the percentage of non-technical people shipping code, right? That requires enablement, that requires culture, and it's powerful.
Have there been any friction points with that at all? I mean, the benefits are clear. You have a lot more people who are able to make direct improvements to the product or the marketing site, whether they're on the engineering organization or not. And they're not necessarily having to waste an engineer's time to maybe make a modification to the marketing site for a button where the text maybe doesn't show up on hover and things of that sort. But has this created any complications at all? I'm sure it's been a net positive, but I'm curious if there's been any negative outcomes from this.
I think mostly minimal. People understand the culture, and we celebrate people who are like crossing functional lines and being close to the customer and having biased reaction. So mostly we celebrate it, and that's by and large the culture in the team. There are specific like areas of friction when we were first getting started. So first of all, like other than the marketing side, all code is reviewed by an actual professional engineer, right? So all PRs, it's not like we're having CSV workers who should code directly to prod. And by and large, the people that we hired and the culture that we're building encourages people to celebrate and be very supportive of non-technical people doing that work. And it's opportunity to upskill, right? And now we have like Cursor installed by like I don't know if the majority, but a good chunk of our non-technical team. But when we were first doing this, there were situations where the particular issue was that the PR that Cursor generated was just too large, right? And so there's a negotiation over like, okay, like you actually have to understand at a high level what it's doing in order for me to approve it, because like I can't review a 5,000 line PR every time the Cursor generated. And so that requires some fine tuning, some negotiation, and some like training on like, okay, how do you prompt it? What is a good PR? What is a small PR? What is appropriate or not appropriate? So that's like really the only specific example I could think of in terms of friction. But it's more of like, we shouldn't do this, more of like, how do we solve this problem because we want to have more of this?
Yeah. Are you using any PR agents, any tools for making it faster to review the PRs?
Yeah, we use Bugbot from Cursor. I think we were using Ellipsis for a little bit. So yeah, I mean, we try out new things as they come, but I think primarily today we use Bugbot.
So shifting gears back to the product and how you've integrated AI into Runway. So you coined the term ambient intelligence. I love that term, by the way, and I know I mentioned it earlier. Runway also has a co-pilot, right? And so for the co-pilot, I'm curious, what was the process of deciding on adding a co-pilot to the product? And how were you able to justify that as maybe a bit more of a, not jarring, but a bit more of a forward, front and center AI feature?
So the Runway Copilot is something we started developing 3 years ago, and it was just, well, like, what's the most straightforward implementation in AI? And it's like a Copilot is a chat interface, right? This is actually pre-ChatGPT, if I remember correctly. And so, yeah, so we did that, and it wasn't particularly thoughtful, and we spent a lot of time just trying to make it work at all. The model capabilities simply weren't capable of that level of reasoning at the time. But the way the thinking is involved is, I wouldn't say we actually have, I think about it in terms of Copilot today, and we're actually about to release a major new version of our AI implementation that is more reflective, actually reflective of our ambient intelligence philosophy, and it doesn't feel like a Copilot. So I've done a demo of this in some private spaces, but we're doing a launch next month. But at a high level, we have this concept called explain mode. And the inspiration behind explain mode, which we haven't demoed anywhere, but I'll just describe it. So when you have ChatGPT, it's an amazing product, but when I think about opportunity for improvement, is that there's two. One is it doesn't have as much context as you want it to have, right, about your business or whatever. And so we can solve that because we know a lot about your business. And the other thing, though, in general with Copilot type of interfaces, and ChatGPT is one of them, is that it doesn't do anything unless you ask it to do something. And for a vertical product, you actually aren't sure of what it can or can't do, right? And often when there is a Copilot, you try to do something you set to do and it can't do it. Right. So then you're like, well, then this is not that useful. And so if you think about what made Cursor work initially is like, it's the tab autocomplete, right? It's like, you're not asking it to do something. You're just working and just making you faster. That's like what I mean by ambient intelligence. And so with explain mode, our idea is, you're using a piece of software. This is a tool for thought, and you have like your business on the screen. What can we do to integrate AI deeply without you having to have a conversation at all? and know what to ask. And so the way Runway, we call it RE, artificial runway intelligence, when you're looking at any screen, you hold an option key and you move, the cursor changes into a different cursor. So if you mouse over a page, it'll explain what the page does. Mouse over a formula, explain what the formula does. You turn on a variance and it'll explain the variance and do a BVA analysis on it. And you don't have to ask it anything at all. It's like basically a mouse-driven ChatGPT. And so that's like the kind of ambient intelligence features that we think is interesting. And it's also integrated with our HubDocs, right? So if you're mousing over a button, it'll say, here's how I use it, right? Because it knows. So like, that's what I mean by like ambient intelligence. Like everyone's just doing the sort of ChatGPT Copilot on the side, and it's like it's not very interesting or imaginative or frankly as useful as it could be.
I saw a few testimonials on your site. One of them was from, I believe, Kendall Jenner's 818 Tequila about saving a ton of time per week. I forget the exact number. I think it was something like 50 hours per week. And I believe that it was attributed to some of these ambient intelligent features that you've incorporated into the product. Can you describe that specific customer and how exactly these AI features are translating to a massive amount of time saved per week?
I think a lot of that time, I mean, to be fair, is actually like non-AI features. It's like just the basic product itself. We integrate with all your data sources, right? And it's really easy to model, really easy to share. But once you have your data in place and your model in place, one of the things that you do very, very frequently is you are thinking about and asking what if questions all the time, right? Like what drives revenue? Like what happens if I hire more people or less people? If there is a variance against what I thought I was going to do 6 months ago, where did that variance come from? And if you think about how you do it on a spreadsheet today, right? Like you make a copy of your spreadsheet, and then to understand the difference between numbers, you have to then trace through a formula that can be like 8 levels deep. And then you're maybe finding like, oh, the reason why this number changed is because like this little tiny conversion rate changed by 10%. And you wouldn't know that without doing all this tracing. And you have to do this all the time. And so being able to accelerate that is, we're not giving you the answer. We are instead like improving your intuition over like what is driving the business, what is the most important causal drivers of growth or non-growth. And that's how we think AI is actually going to be an Iron Man suit, as opposed to sort of this Terminator agent that's going to give you all the answers, but not make you any smarter.
So you were leading an organization named Sandbox VR. And during COVID, it was hit pretty hard. I think revenue had gone to zero, practically zero around that time. I'm curious what you learned from that may have translated into your AI transformation journey, specifically around the distinction that you've maybe made between tools versus real user needs.
I mean, that I don't know that I learned a whole lot about AI then, because this is like right before the GPT-3 moment, actually. So that wasn't top of mind. That experience just mostly sucked. It was just deeply painful to lay off to 95% of the company, and like the company was on its trajectory, and then it just by act of God went to zero. But also that experience of scenario planning for COVID and different scenarios is what led directly to Runway and why this problem is interesting for me to work on. But that is in the pre-AI days, so I can't really connect that with AI in a meaningful way.
Well, for one, I understand that it was part of the motivation for starting Runway, but was it also maybe a primer for adapting to massive societal changes and trends, right? We had COVID around 2020. You were early to the LLM wave, but it was clearly transformative, especially with some of these major flagship launches like ChatGPT. GPT-4 comes across as a moment for a lot of companies internally when they had the internal wow moment. Was there maybe any common denominator between the urgency or tactics deployed during a transformative moment that you carried through?
I think like having like a global pandemic shut down your entire company is like very different from building an AI product. But I will say like if there's one thread, it is like I do like to focus on what are the things that I don't anticipate changing. And maybe this is like a more useful answer. So the thesis behind Sandbox was, okay, there's a very interesting experience. If you haven't been to a Sandbox VR, I mean, if it shut down, but now it's doing I think it's approaching $100 million a year revenue now, 1,000 employees and profitable. And what it is you go to these stores and put on this motion capture suit and a VR headset, and you go on adventures with friends. Basically, like you're in a real-time motion capture stage, you are playing a real-life movie. Very fun. And you can only do it outdoors because it requires a lot of space and requires dedicated hardware. You can't, it's like literally the hardware isn't available in your home, not for like less than $250,000. So the thesis behind that is that AI is going to be a thing, even back in 2018. In general, technology is going to dramatically improve the world. But what I bet, and VR is going to get better, but what the bet is that real estate will never get cheaper. And so if you wanted to have experience, the limiting factor is actually real estate. Like you can't have that if you don't have like a pretty large open space. And so in that world, then this is an appreciating asset, right? Because as the technology gets better, the experience gets better, but also this is an experience that increasingly is only going to be available outside of home. So that was the thesis for that. And for Runway, the bet on positioning us as a tool for thought is one, that is a hole in the market because there's a bunch of workflow tools that automate data. But after you spend all this money on it, you can't get off your spreadsheet because the spreadsheet helps you think. And by getting off the spreadsheet is the entire reason why you want to buy one of things in the first place. So that's the catch-22. Even in an AGI world or an ASI world where, let's say, every decision that GPT-7 makes is the equivalent of AlphaGo. Like no human can make a better, more optimal decision than this thing. In that world, what decisions should humans make at all? And I think that's less of like a optimization choice and more of like a cultural societal choice. Do we just allow like GPT-7 to run the government, run a company, run everything? Or is it that Iron Man suit is a superhuman Jarvis who is advising us, and ultimately we are they have the agency to make the choice and make the decision? So my bet is that we will want that world. Then in that world, how do you know if a decision is good or not? And the only way to know is actually to go through the process of understanding the business and how it works and what implications are. In the same way that the only way to know if you're writing good software is to actually understand how to write code. And so I think there is sort of this catch-22 where I think the people with the most taste and most agency will actually still have to learn all of the things that AI is good at in order to make better decisions, guiding decisions for this ASI. And so that's why I think Runway is a long-term interesting bet in the same way the Sandbox is.
I love that answer. Right? You said something along the lines of it forced you to get good at understanding and imagining the things that won't change. And this kind of goes back to a few points that we had discussed earlier around we're going through this massive moment in society. Technology is changing and progressing so quickly. People are struggling to adapt in a lot of ways. Are there any other things that you hang on to that you think are maybe steadfast amidst all this change that maybe for leaders and organizations so that they can separate the wheat from the chaff and understand maybe what is hype and ephemeral versus what is actually here to stay?
Yeah. So there's like basically two things that at a high level I think about in terms of what accrues value in AGI world. One is like just scarcity. So what are things you can't make more of? I don't own any Bitcoin, but Bitcoin and real estate, right? So like buying as much land as you can in Wyoming, which I'm doing, you can't make more of it, right? So that's something that is provably going to appreciate if everything else is basically free. The other thing that I have a pretty strong conviction on is proof of human. So in a world where, let's say, your robot Optimus chef can cook you a better meal every single night than Thomas Keller to French Laundry, you will pay more money than ever to eat at a French Laundry. Not because it's actually better food, but because you know it was cooked by Thomas Keller. And so what doesn't change and what's relatively slow to change is biology. And biologically, we are like status-seeking beings, and that's related to other humans, biological humans. And so we are going to care about Mr. Beast. We're going to care about Blackpink, right? Like the people that we know. Yes, you can like create a billion Blackpinks who are like Blackpink, who can make good songs, but there is only one Blackpink. There's only one Mr. Beast. And that's going to be the thing that's going to be valuable in the long run.
Does that make a stronger case for things like founder-led marketing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like why do you want to use Runway? It's like, well, that's the one that was built by this guy that is a human, right? I think that's true, right? I think clearly it's like, yeah, this is like, what is our defensibility? We have no defensibility. Like, we're just basically a GPT wrapper. But only defensibility is going to be the brand. And so brand and relationships and proof of human are going to be the thing. And even as the brand, what drives out of the brand isn't going to be like, if everyone can do AI amazing ads, then the only thing that's going to work is proof of human. Like, this is not made by AI because it's a real person. We're having a real dinner. You can hear my voice, and it's not me. I'm doing it live, right? It's not an AI bot.
I agree with that. It's fascinating. And so founder-led marketing, obviously, well, it seems like there may be an increasing benefit to that moving forward, commercial benefit. How about internally? Do you think there's any implications internally? There's a huge wave right now of returning to in office. Maybe that's partially inspired by this, or maybe it's not. Are there opportunities for teams to leverage this macro trend that you're describing to maybe improve team culture?
I don't know. I think there are useful tools. I think like I've benefited a lot from having good coaches. And I think that outside of learning or summarizing, like the number one consumer use case of AI is like coaching, getting advice, and therapy. I think that is a tremendously good use of AI. And having that be more widely accessible, like my friend Chris runs Rosebud, right? So, which is a journaling app, and they partner with therapists, but having that be more widely accessible is going to be helpful for culture broadly. So I think from that perspective, yes. But I also think culture and human relationships it can't be just digitized and transactional like that, right? Like, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, there's nothing that replaces like a real person who is a real friend, and we're having drinks and we're seeing the face to face. Like, VR doesn't do that. And I think that is also going to be something that won't change because that's biological.
Yeah. So shifting gears to angel investing. So you're a prolific angel investor. You've invested in companies like Clubhouse and Amplitude. Are you starting to look for AI readiness or AI forward companies and the companies that you're investing in nowadays? I mean, more so in terms of, are they leveraging AI to improve their operating leverage? Is that something that you're paying much attention to, or
I don't know. I think the investor of the updates by and large don't go into as much detail on that. But yes, like, what was it called? Wonder, which is a sort of like luxury Airbnb network, when they have the most detailed investor updates out of any of my companies. And I think they routinely talk about, oh yeah, we had this AI workflow and it improved operations and our efficiency and increased leverage by quite a bit. It's not a thing I look for. And the reason is because that is my current baseline assumption. Like, if you're a startup and startups are defined by lack of resources, that's kind of the only way to win. So it's not something that I feel like is worth selecting for. If that's not already in place, we shouldn't even be talking if that isn't already your default assumption.
the reason I bring it up is I think there was a tweet from Keith Verboy, who's now a co-star, who said that, I believe he said something along the lines of the last 3 conversations he had with portfolio companies were centered around how they can become more AI forward. And that was slightly surprising to me, assuming the same thing that you just shared there, that companies were already figuring it out. What do you think might be missing? Like, what do you think is maybe the challenge that startups like those might be dealing with in moving into what they consider to be AI forward? My guess is partially it's that maybe they're already there and they just don't know it, but maybe there's more to it. Maybe there are true challenges with transforming an organization.
Yeah, I have a non-consensus take on that question. So what I've seen with customers or prospects, right? Even as recently as a year ago, if we talk to our prospects, they're not asking us about AI at all. And if we talk about AI, they're like, oh, that's nice. And starting early this year, now we talk to prospects, they're asking us about AI. And it is basically in most cases, the vibe is basically, I actually don't care what your AI does. I just need to make sure it has AI because my CEO told me I must buy the one that has AI and we can't use anything without it. I need to check that box. Like, so it's a dramatic turn. And I also observed that when I talk to actual customers, finance people today, they're using AI quite a bit, right? Like they're using Cursor a lot. They're using ChatGPT a lot for almost everything. And they also feel like they're overwhelmed with a lot of hype. Like there's all of these different AI products coming out all the time. They're all like, the AI SDR is going to like triple your revenue overnight. And you try a lot of these things and they don't do that thing. And so my observation is that actually it might be just fine. In that, once a product does do that thing that it promises and it does it well, whether it's NAN or ChatGPT or Cursor, like adoption is very rapid because the senses are directly there. And so the sort of like heartburn that investors and operators have over this is like, oh, we're going to be left behind. But it's like, okay, you're going to have maybe a 6 month like a head start on this, which is like valuable. You should do it. But if you don't, in 6 months, the product that is going to work is being very clear and your team is going to want to adopt it. Like we dealt with the same thing where it's like, oh my God, 3 years ago, AI is going to change everything and it's going to be amazing. And we spent so much time making it work. And we're like, the right thing would have been to work on other things and just wait for GPT or O1 to come out. So that's my think on it. I think there's like a little bit of hysteria around everyone's falling behind and we must use a new thing all the time. When it's good, people are already using it.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to your other point that you made around imagining things that won't change. Like the core principles that make for a good product are going to withstand all of the technological progress that's being made. Okay, so and I'll let you choose from a couple questions here. So the first question is relating to like what you would teach children, this next generation, about AI. The second one is about the things you're most excited about as technology progresses.
I mean, we could quickly do both of them. That's a really tough question because my wife and I, we have 2 girls, 5 and 10, and we struggle with it all the time. On the good part, like last Christmas when we went skiing with some friends, our older daughter, she was 10, they were in Tokyo and we saw Gundam and they wanted to make a video game and they never made a video game before. So of course they go back to the hotel and they asked me, how do we make a video game? And they're like, what do you want the video game to be about? And they said, we want it to be a cross between Gundam and Transformers, like trans them. And they're like, cool, well, here's some art. And, what do you want the rules to be? Well, like, what kind of rules do we have? Cool. So they like created this game. And then they're like, how do we build this? And they're like, well, to build a game, we need to download Unity. So we need to download Unity. Right? They're 10 and they're kind of like, just have this infinitely patient oracle that will guide them step by step and teach them anything they want. It's like the, Neil Stephenson's A Young Ladies Illustrated Primer in real life. One thing is I encourage my kids to use ChatGPT as much as possible. It's fantastic. And also, I'll say it's not always right, but it's only going to get better from here, right? Like this worse is going to ever be. And so just seeing AI as a useful tool is useful. But the second part is like, what is valuable in the long run? I do not know. But it's in some ways, it's stressful in that I have no idea what they should be doing. Like, should it be doing computer science? I have no idea. Should it be doing like arts and crafts instead and learning how to like be a chef? I don't know. Being a YouTuber, probably. We're actually encouraging that. But ultimately, it's about like agency and what makes them happy. So I think in some ways it also reduces some pressure and I think that it doesn't really matter. I think on some level, it's whatever makes them happy and whatever.
I'll just pause there just to sort of respond to that answer before the second question. I completely agree with you. So I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and she's very young, but she plays with ChatGPT. She talks to ChatGPT. She calls it Siri, which is maybe giving Siri a little too much credit.
Wait, she's 2?
Yeah. She's literally having conversations
talking
with
ChatGPT?
ChatGPT.
Oh my God.
And you made a point about becoming YouTubers and leaning into that. I completely agree with you. I think you made this point earlier as well, like personality, having unique experiences, and there's going to be an abundance of time that people have if jobs continue to get automated to just consume content. And so I Just want to underscore what you said. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're very on the same page there, very much.
I have to recommend a toy. There's this toy called Dino, and basically someone put ChatGPT inside like a stuffed dinosaur, and you can like guide it to like maybe teach my kid math, and it'll do that.
Yeah, learning to learn really quickly, I think is just so important. I'll definitely check out Dino. And then the second question was, what is it that you're most excited about in terms of the technological progress over the next couple of years? It seems like we're maybe hitting a bit of a plateau with some of these large language models, or with ChatGPT 5. Reception was maybe not as positive as the OpenAI team may have hoped. Still a great move in the right direction, but I'm curious what excites you the most over the next year or two.
Yeah, I mean, on the last point, I just want to say like I am as bullish on scaling laws as ever. I shot on GPT-5 on last week on the information too, but I mean, 4.5 was supposed to be 5. 4.5 didn't work out, right? And what GPT-5 actually is in my view just 4.5. Like, so I don't think there is actually GPT-5 yet. Is like basically my read on it. So I'm not as disappointed as other people. I don't think it's very good, but I'm just not that disappointed. So, but what I'm most excited about is for me, just selfishly for me as a person who likes to make things and is very creative and lots of ideas, just being able to like express myself and instantiate the ideas that I have in ways that previously weren't possible for time and capital reasons. Like that power of creation is what I'm most excited about. And of course, everything else is nice too, right? Like all health, technology, diseases, all of that. But like the ability to create and democratize creation is something I value pretty deeply. And software is a particularly time-consuming and expensive thing to create.
Love it. Well, Siqi, thank you so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it too.
AutoSkills helps teams go from AI curious to AI ready. We run tailored workshops to uncover where AI has the biggest impact in your business, whether that's automating repetitive tasks, cutting hours out of your daily workflows, or choosing the right mix of tools and custom solutions. It's practical, hands-on, and built to get your team using AI for work that matters. Book your free 30-minute AI readiness audit at autoskills.ai.